I'm Tom from Do It Yourself Home Automation, and this is a comparison of the Fitbit Ionic and Fitbit Versa smartwatches. So, this is the Fitbit Ionic on the left here, and this is the Versa on the right. The Ionic is the older model, or the one that was introduced first in the smartwatch line of Fitbits, and this is the newer model, the Versa, that was introduced about a year and a half later, I believe. So, what are the differences between these two? Well, first, let's take a look at what are the similarities. So both of these are the smartwatches from Fitbit. So unlike the basic fitness trackers where you're looking at mostly just fitness stats, maybe a few smart features like some of the wristband style trackers do have payment and that kind of thing. But generally, with the basic Fitbits, you're just looking at fitness stats, heart rate, sleep, that kind of thing. With the smartwatch line of the Fitbit Ionic and Versa, you're adding in full app functionality where you can get apps from different creators and you can do all kinds of different functions, both exercise related and non-exercise related, like controlling a Nest thermostat, calling an Uber, all kinds of other things when you pair these with your phone and use them as a smartwatch. So in terms of similarities, there really are a lot of similarities between these two watches. Both the Ionic and the Versa have all of the standard Fitbit kinds of features. So it'll do step tracking, it'll do the number of floors that you climb, it'll track calories burned throughout the day. Both of these have really good heart rate sensors on the back, so you're able to track heart rate continuously. Both of them also do sleep tracking. So really, in terms of that functionality, they're pretty much identical. And in terms of the apps that are available on them, they're basically identical too. I've noticed some of the Versa apps, like the Today app on the Versa, is a little bit more updated, so you can get a little more detail on sleep stats and that kind of thing versus on the Ionic, but fundamentally you're using the same app framework. So both of those are going to have that app functionality. Both of them are waterproof, so you can use them for swim tracking, you can wear them in the shower, and you can wear them at the beach. Technically, they're water resistant. Nobody says waterproof anymore. But really, I mean, these are things I've worn this for about 3 years, maybe 2.5 years, 3 years, and haven't had any issues with wearing it continuously, even in the shower every day and that kind of thing. So those are the similarities between the two watches. And so what are really the differences and why would you choose one versus the other? So the Fitbit Ionic, you can see just in terms of styling versus the Versa. The Versa is a little bit sleeker. I think it's a little bit newer of a look, kind of almost like an Apple Watch look, where it's got the beveled edge on it. It's a little bit more of a perfect square here versus the Ionic. It's just a little bit bigger, a little bit more of a kind of rectangle shape, and it doesn't have as much of that sort of modern beveling on the edge. It's more of a straight edge on the side. And again, I think it's just reflective of when these were designed. This is just a little bit maybe more of an older styling. The Versa has a little bit of a newer styling, I think. Weight-wise, they're basically the same. They really doesn't make a huge difference. And in terms of comfort of wearing these, I actually find that the stock bands that come with the Ionic feel a little bit more premium, a little bit heavier duty, kind of rubber. These bands feel like, works fine, but it doesn't feel like it's going to last quite as long as the one here, where it has these little kind of aluminum or some kind of metal inserts and that kind of thing. And I think the reason for that gets to another difference is that with the Versa, they're really designing this to be extremely easy to swap out the bands. And they want you to buy different custom bands, which are provided by all kinds of different providers. You have traditional watch companies getting into making Fitbit bands. You can buy them on vacation as a souvenir from different places. So really with the Versa, they want you to be easily swapping those bands out and customizing it. Even on a daily basis, you could choose a different band for whatever it is you were going to do that day. So again, that's something that I think this one is really meant so that you're going to just wear the same band. There are custom bands for the Ionic, but it's not as prominent. With the Versa, they really want you to be able to easily swap those bands out, maybe use it as a fashion statement, customize it to your outfit, that kind of thing. So that's another difference. What you don't see here that I think is a key difference is the charger. With the Ionic, to charge it, you have this little cable that you have to situate on the charging contacts, and it has to fit perfectly. And sometimes it doesn't, especially if you get sand and dirt. I've shown how to remove that in other videos, but if you get sand and dirt in those charging contacts, sometimes it doesn't sit quite right, and you can think you've charged it and find it's still out of battery. With the Versa, Fitbit has updated that, and they've actually added a full cradle, and I've shown this again in other videos, where you can snap it into the cradle, and it kind of locks it in place, and you know that you're definitely charging. So that's, a subtle difference, but in terms of usability on a day-to-day basis, I love the new cradle for the Versa because you just don't have to worry about whether it's actually charging properly or not. I think then in terms of features, though, the key difference between these two is actually the fact that on the Ionic, you have full GPS tracking, and on the Versa, you don't have full GPS tracking. You only have GPS tracking if you pair it with a smartphone. And this is a very specific difference. It's really important for only a very specific use case. And that's if you're going to track a run or a hike and you want to have very detailed stats on exactly how far you went and how quickly. And also if you want to map that run or hike after the fact and see a map of where you went in your phone or on the Fitbit website. And if you want to do that and you're not going to be carrying your smartphone, then you definitely want to get the Ionic because it has its own GPS chip built into the watch itself. And even if you're not toting your phone along for your run, it can actually sync with satellites itself, and it'll track and actually map your run. And then when it syncs, you can get a map of that run, and you get detailed statistics on exactly how far you went using that GPS instead of just the step counting functionality. And again, you can do that without your phone. The Versa can do the exact same functions, but it doesn't have its own GPS chip built into the watch. And as a result, it has to be paired with your phone in order to do that mapping of your run. Now, if you don't care about the incredibly detailed stats, you're fine with just using the step counting functionality, and you don't need the mapping, or if you're willing to bring your phone with you when you do need those mapping functions, maybe you use it to listen to music anyway, then the Versa is probably fine. If you need that mapping functionality and you don't want to have to bring your phone along with you on your runs, your hikes, then the Ionic adds in that built-in GPS chip and gives you that functionality. You're paying for that, though, in a couple of different ways. One of those is the cost. So the Ionic is usually more expensive, I think about $50 more expensive than the Versa in most cases, although they do have different sales and things. But in general, the Ionic is the more expensive watch. Another way you pay for it is just in the size and form factor. I'm assuming part of the reason that this can have these nice, clean, modern bevels, whereas this has to be a little bit bigger, is that they'll probably have to have an antenna in here somewhere, maybe wrapped around on the inside, to be able to pick up the satellites for GPS tracking. And, that obviously is going to take up space. It's going to constrain the way they can design the watch because they have to get good reception for GPS. With the Versa, there's none of those constraints, and that's probably part of why it has kind of a thinner, sleeker overall look versus the Ionic. And then the final way that you pay for that functionality is in battery life. When you're using the GPS tracking function and it's actually connected to satellites and logging your run, that really drains the battery very quickly. And you pretty much have to charge the watch between every run or walk that you would track. With the Versa, on the other hand, because it's doing all of the GPS locking and tracking and everything through your phone, it's a little bit less battery intensive, so you're not having to worry about the battery life as much. So, to summarize, I think if you like the sleek kind of look of the Versa and you like the lower price, there's not really a lot of difference in the overall functionality. I think the only thing beyond the GPS tracking is I think there's an Adidas workout set you can get for the Ionic that's not available for the Versa, but fundamentally the same functions. And really the distinguishing thing is, do you need that GPS tracking, and do you need to have it be, something you can do without your phone synced? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then you definitely want to get the Ionic and pay the extra price and deal with, a little bit bigger of a size on the watch and a little bit lower battery life. If you're willing to sync your phone or you don't care about GPS tracking of runs and hikes, then I would go ahead with the Versa. You get basically the same functions. You'll save yourself a little money, and you get a little bit more modern and sleeker of a design, in my opinion. The only other reason that you might want to consider one versus the other is, again, I've just seen Fitbit really push the bands on the Versa, and there's a lot more custom bands for it I've seen. So if you're wearing this as more of a fashion statement, then that's definitely a reason to think about the Versa versus the Ionic as well. If you found this helpful in any way, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps.